All right. Good morning, everyone. I'm going to give everyone a minute to kind of settle in, and then we'll get started for our day 3. Okay. I think we are all here, that will be here for now. And we have a group joining us online, so thank you guys for joining us. Okay, welcome to day 3 of our conference. It's so great to see everyone come back. You know we're doing something right when we have still a full house on day 3, so thank you all for being here. So I said I would do the opening remarks today, and as I sat down to think about this conference and how I would open the third day, I turned to something that really grounds me, and it's literature and books. And so I picked up this book, Becoming Brave Together. And this is a collection of stories from mothers raising children with disabilities. And if you live in the rare disease community, you know there's somebody very special in this community. Her name's Effie Parks, and she kind of is our mom idol. She is a wonderful, wonderful, wonderful woman who has truly become a guiding light in the rare disease community. So Effie has a son, Ford, and he was diagnosed with CTNNB1 syndrome. She really transformed her family's journey into a crusade for advocacy, support, and empowerment for families navigating similar challenges. She's a host of the Once Upon a Gene podcast and has received several awards for her advocacy. Not only does she do speaking engagements and patient and advocacy conferences, but she shares her experiences and insights from her work to bridge the gap between all rare disease stakeholders. She's very skilled in community engagement, and she has been able to really work towards her mission of leaving the world better than she found it. So just settle in for a second. I'm just going to ask you guys to bear with me as I read to you something that Effie has told us. So she wrote this chapter. It's called The Birth of a Lifeline. And PK said it was okay to cry. So Dr. Fox, if I cry, it's because she told me it was okay. Loneliness has a peculiar way of sneaking into our lives, silently creeping into the corners of our existence until it becomes a suffocating presence. I was catching myself so many times as I passed the mirror, realizing just how isolated I had become. The presence of a rare disease in our lives had intricately woven a web of challenges, but it was isolation that took me by surprise. I vividly remember the day we received my son Ford's diagnosis, CTNNB1 syndrome. It was a moment that shattered the dreams I had woven in my mind, a picturesque vision of motherhood filled with laughter, milestones, and boundless possibilities. In an instant, that image burst into flames, consumed by the harsh reality of a rare disease. As they spouted the future, severe global developmental delays, never walk, never talk, shortened lifespan. Ford's disability, the absence of effective treatments, and the relentless stream of appointments became our new normal. Hospital stays, navigating insurance, and the insertion of a feeding tube further compounded the complexity of our daily lives. It was a relentless, all-consuming whirlwind that threatened to swallow me whole. In the midst of caring for my precious son, I realized I was also grieving. I was grieving the loss of life I had envisioned for Ford, a life that seemed so distant from the one that we were now navigating. It was as if I were mourning a fictional character, a figment of my imagination, and the idealized future I had created for my child. The grief was an unexpected and heavy burden, one that I carried silently as I tended to Ford's needs days in and day out. Each day was a struggle in so many ways. I often found myself gasping for breath, both physically and emotionally. My throat felt tight, constricted by the weight of anxiety and the overwhelming sense of isolation. The constant barrage of medical appointments, therapies, the unpredictability of Ford's condition had left me feeling utterly adrift. As time passed, I realized that the loneliness I felt was not solely due to physical isolation, but also a profound sense of disconnect from my own identity. I had lost sight of who I was, of the breezy lightness that had defined me before Ford's diagnosis. The weight of caregiving had eclipsed my own sense of self, and I knew I had to make a change. With determination, I embarked on a journey of self-discovery and healing. I needed to find my people. I sought out support from fellow caregivers who understood the unique challenges we faced. It was in connecting with others who walked a similar path that I found solace and a renewed sense of purpose. These shared experiences offered a lifeline, a way to navigate the labyrinth of rare disease caregiving while preserving my own identity. I also began to recognize the importance of acknowledging and processing my grief. When I finally recognized that I was grappling with grief, the realization brought a profound sense of relief. For the longest time, I thought that grief was solely reserved for death. Embracing this newfound understanding marked a transformative turning point in my journey. In doing so, I found a way to honor the dreams I had for Ford while embracing the reality of our own journey. The journey was far from easy, but as I rekindled the inner light that had dimmed for so long, I realized that I could use my newfound strength to not only support my son, but also to make a difference in the lives of others facing similar challenges. This transformation allowed me to turn the suffocating presence of loneliness into a home base for connection, empathy, and hope. In the world of rare diseases, where isolation is a constant companion, I discovered that by acknowledging my own vulnerability and reaching out to others, I could find the support and community we desperately needed. And in doing so, I learned that even in the darkest moments, there is a potential for light, connection, and profound growth. This was the birth of the lifeline I cast. It's in the midst of this isolation that I decided I could continue down this path alone, but I couldn't let the gap between Ford and the rest of the world keep expanding, so I embarked on a mission to bridge that gap, not just for our family, but for countless others who are navigating the same treacherous waters. I knew I needed to create a space where we could learn, share our stories, and educate ourselves and others about the rare disease journey. This realization led to the creation of the Once Upon a Gene podcast and our community. It wasn't an easy endeavor, but it was a necessary one. I understood that the road ahead would always be challenging, and I needed to find a way to not only cope, but also find joy and purpose in our unique circumstances. My motivation was clear. I didn't want the next family to endure the same level of hardship we had faced. Creating the podcast and community gave me a renewed sense of purpose and energy. It became my lifeline, a source of strength in the face of adversity. As I shared our story and connected with other families, I realized that there was immense power okay, buddy, you're going to wait 1 minute. Go sit with Daddy. Sorry, Lucas is ready. In the middle of a serious talk, Lucas. Just give me 1 minute, and then it will be your turn, okay? You can go sit with Dad, and I'll get you in 1 minute. Okay. Sorry if I repeat myself. So in reaching out to others, I found the light I had been seeking. Helping families navigate the complex world of rare diseases and caregiving became my passion. It was no longer just about survival. It was about thriving and empowering others to do the same. The joy I found in making a positive impact on someone else's journey was immeasurable, and it filled the void of that loneliness had left behind. When I started the Once Upon a Gene podcast, there was almost no content like it available, but I knew I couldn't be the only one desperately seeking connection and understanding. Today, there are dozens of podcasts, communities, and resources dedicated to rare diseases and caregiving. It's heartening to see the growth of this community, providing a lifeline for parents like me who were once drowning in loneliness. Loneliness is a formidable adversary, especially for parents raising children with rare diseases. It can be paralyzing, isolating, and suffocating. However, my journey has taught me that it doesn't have to be this way. By reaching out, sharing our stories, and creating communities, we can find light in the darkest of moments. Creating the Once Upon a Gene podcast and community was my way of turning the tide against loneliness. It became a lifeline, not only for me, but for countless others. And it's a testament to the power of connection, the strength of shared experiences, and the transformative impact of serving others. In the world of rare diseases, where isolation often reigns, we have the power to create our own communities and find solace in each other's stories. Loneliness may have been a formidable opponent, but it was no match for the resilience, determination of caregivers like us. In our shared journey, we discover that we are never truly alone, and together, we illuminate even the darkest paths. I think if you took Effie's passage and you replaced it with channeling hope in this community, we would see that this is truly the community that we have created. And so instead of the Once Upon a Gene podcast, it truly is channeling hope that has created this community. And many of us know the whirlwind that Effie speaks about: long nights, relentless appointments, all the decisions. At times, it can feel like we're drowning. I don't know, why am I crying? But it's when we reach out and someone reaches back, that's when things start to shift. That's when our lifelines are born. For me, those moments came after seeing our 5th neurologist for Lucas, who's now 10 and like a really cool cowboy. And Lucas lives with Cliff Ed. I sat across from the doctor and I was hoping for some progress, some next steps, something that was gonna give me hope. And he said, "You really can't move the science forward without a foundation." So I knew I couldn't be the only one facing this. And around that time is when Shan and Jeremy came into my life, and it just was kismet in terms of this was meant to be. One of our first conversations was what to name the foundation. So we went through dozens of ideas. We reached out to friends, we had polls, we did all of the things. Some were meaningful, some were creative, some involved magical unicorns. I'm still not entirely against that, so if there's a name change, you'll know where it came from. In the end, it really had to be channeling hope, because that's what we do. We are channeling hope through community, advocacy, science, and through every single hug, email, text message. We truly channel hope. In this conference, this moment, it's proof that we come together. We can build something bigger. We can build community. We can build momentum. And we can build the lifeline that carries us and others forward. We create a space of laughter, celebration of milestones, even if not typical and maybe in some unexpected ways, but most importantly, hope. So as I was thinking about all of this and taking notes at our kitchen counter, Lucas came over and asked me what I was doing. And I explained that I was learning about other moms and moms like me in an attempt to bring us all together on this last day of the conference. So he nodded and walked away, and he came back with his own book that he felt like encompassed what he thought we should all know. So I'm going to see if he wants to come up. Just so he knows he's got a fresh suit on. Come on up, dude. And if you know anything about me, I have probably ordered the most packages at the hotel. So they are inundated with packages from us, and one being this suit, because Lucas did want to be sharp and ready to go. He has a book about Willie Nelson. We will not be reading that. But
I'm just going to tell you one fact about Willie Nelson.
Okay.
Willie Nelson was born in San Antonio.
So that's fun fact about Willie Nelson, born in San Antonio. Lucas, come over here. I'm going to have David start up the book. Okay. Okay.
Howdy, yo. It's great to see you back.
Okay. Okay. Oh. We're going to back up. And then this is going to work, right, David? I'm pressing.
Okay. No two people are exactly the same. We are unique, and that's great. Being different is what makes you special. You are right exactly as you are. Being different can be lonely. You might feel like you do not belong. But we are honest and critic. Everyone needs a friend. Friends help one another. Friends learn from one another. Friends know that no two people are alike. And a friend will celebrate you just as you are. Some people don't understand. They think being different is scary. Try to be good and brave and strong. Let people see the real you. Sometimes things might seem bigger than you, but you are always stronger than your fears. That's why you have courage. Courage is when something is scary, but you do it anyway. Don't let anyone try to stop you from taking a chance to try something new. Surround yourself with people who love you. They are your cheerleaders. Listen to them when they say yes. When you fall down, get back up. Stay fierce. You know that you got this. Don't stand aside when it's your story. Be the side. Be you whatever you are. If people step on the stair, just keep going. Remember, not everyone may understand you, but that doesn't mean you can't still be happy just the way you are. Never say no to being yourself. Feel and booty inside and out. When you let your light shine, it will brighten the world. People never want to say, being different is beautiful. Just be you because you are enough. Being enough means you're full of love. You have purpose. You aren't perfect, no one is, but you are okay being perfect. You yourself. You are enough, and your friends is enough. Your teacher and neighbor is strong enough too. Remember that we all belong. Look for the good in the world. Stop by looking at the mirror. Love what you see there. Because just like me, you are enough. My name is Lucas. I'm 10 years old. I have something called Cliff Ad. It's part of the NALCN disorder, which makes a difference in some ways. But that's okay. Being different is actually kind of awesome. I read a book called You Are Enough by Malcolm O'Hare. It's just line and says, and just be you because you are enough. That really stuck with me. It makes me feel proud. Like, yeah, I am enough just the way I am. Sometimes I do things differently than other kids, but this doesn't mean I'm funny or cool. It just means I do things my way. One of the best parts of being here is to be fun with other kids and family who understand. We help each other, we learn from each other, we cheer on, and we have fun too. This weekend was super fun. On Thursday night, we were playing a game with other. Then we went to Morgan Wonderland. It was so fun. I went with you, went with friend James, and it felt like fun. We also went to SeaWorld. That was awesome. Also, I had more tango with my friend, and I had a pretzel. Let me tell you, that pretzel was huge. Okay, quick joke. Why did pretzel go to school? Because it wanted me little twisted genius. Being here at the conference is really special. Just not about Dodgers inside. It's about meeting friends, having fun, and no weird at all. If you see me today, come say hi. You might ask me, well, I would like to have Cliff. I didn't tell you what makes some things harder, but it also makes me me. And I like being me. Thanks to everyone who made this happen, the organizers, the helpers, the family, and all my new friends. And remember, just be you because you are totally enough.
Ooh, sorry. Okay. Are there dry eyes? I'm asking you guys to now help us. So in this book, we talk about help, learn, and celebrate, and that's really been part of our community this week. On your table, there are postcards, and this is now your moment to reflect. We want you to think of someone at the conference, anyone who is in this room, not in this room, someone who helped you, taught you something, or simply deserves to be celebrated. It might be someone who welcomed you at the door, a volunteer in childcare, a researcher who made some complex science click, a fellow parent who shared a story that gave you strength. And I'm just going to take 5 minutes, and in this space, please fill out these cards. Please think about as many as you can, but be specific and heartfelt. We will get these to the people that matters. So if you could just take 5 minutes to fill out the card, that would be great. When you're done, you can leave them on the table and we can collect them, or Emily will be there out in registration with the box and we can drop them in the boxes. Okay, one more minute just to think about and celebrate somebody here today. These will remain on the tables, and Emily's amazing. She's back there with the box, and you can see this box will be out at registration. And so please feel free to continue to identify folks. So many people went into making this conference so amazing, and we just want, it would be great if a little bit down the line they get a recognition of what they did and how meaningful it was to our community. What you wrote matters. Your postcard might just be someone's lifeline, and if you ran out of time, don't worry. The rest of the morning you have to write these, they are all over the tables, and they're truly reminders we're in this together. It's our Channeling Hope community. I am now going to introduce Natasha Ludwig. Dr. Ludwig is a neuropsychologist, researcher, and advocate with expertise in rare genetic neurodevelopmental conditions. I'm trying to summarize. She has a very lengthy information, so she will correct me if I'm saying anything incorrect. But through her role at Kennedy Krieger and Johns Hopkins, she leads efforts in neurodevelopmental phenotyping and patient-centered outcomes. She ensures that even the most complex voices are seen, heard, and truly counted. What makes Dr. Ludwig's work especially powerful is not only her scientific leadership, but her lived experience. She's a sibling of an adult with a rare disorder, and she knows firsthand the challenges that our families face. She works side by side with patient advocacy groups, families, and researchers to bring home hope, equity, and rigor. Her commitment to redefining how we measure progress, quality of life, and meaningful change in children like ours aligns perfectly with the purpose of this conference, to come together, to learn from one another, and to drive change through collaboration. So please join me in warmly welcoming Dr. Natasha Ludwig. Did I get it? Okay.
Thank you so much for that warm welcome, and thank you so much for inviting me to the conference. Oh my goodness, I need to grab my glasses. This happened to me at a different conference. 1 second. So yes, thank you so much again for having me. I'm so delighted to be here. I go to a lot of rare disease conferences, and I just have to say your community is one of a kind and is moving so quickly, and it's really, really amazing to see, and that's because of you all as patients, and thank you so much. So today I'm going to talk about the critical role of patient engagement in the development of novel treatments for rare neurogenetic conditions. I want to thank Dr. Fox for her talk yesterday. It was amazing. Today I'm going to focus a little bit about how patients can really power one thing that she touched on yesterday, which is around kind of outcome measures to get ready for clinical trials. This is really the focus of my work, making sure that we're developing outcome measures for clinical trials that are really patient-focused and capture meaningful aspects of the condition and can capture meaningful change. And the only way we can develop those tools is by partnering with you. And so I am a neuropsychologist, so I see many patients with rare neurogenetic conditions. I monitor development. I work with their medical team to help make treatment decisions based on how they're doing from a developmental and functional standpoint. But I'm also a researcher as well. And as was mentioned, here's just some of my funding and disclosures, but I am also the older sibling of a 34-year-old with ASXL3 related disorder, and so my brother was diagnosed with autism when he was 4 in the early 90s, and that was kind of his diagnosis, right? And it wasn't until I started specializing as a faculty member in rare neurogenetic conditions that I asked my parents, I'm like, hey, has anyone ever offered genetic testing? And they were like, no. And I'm like, okay, like I think, he looks a lot like my patients. I think we should get him tested. And so they did, and it came back in 2021 that he has ASXL3 related disorder. And so I've kind of linked up with that community as well as other communities in the rare neurogenetic space. But I just wanted to mention that he is really my inspiration for my whole career and what I do. So. Okay, so the goal of my talk is to emphasize the importance of your voice as patients and caregivers in the development of meaningful outcome measures needed for clinical care and for clinical trials. Sharing your voice is possible through participating in research. So I want to start off talking a little bit about why we need measures, because the rest of my talk is going to be focused on outcome measure development, right? So why do we need measures? Well, we need measures for clinical care, right, to understand the individual. As a neuropsychologist, I diagnose, using measures like autism, intellectual disability, cortical vision impairment, right? So it's important for diagnosis. It's important for monitoring as well, so how a child is doing over time. Also for research studies, right, to understand the group. So for natural history studies, measures are really, really important to collect health information, to understand how the disease progresses over time, right, and also for clinical trials to understand how kids are doing on on a treatment, whether the treatment group is doing better or worse or the same as the untreated group. So let's focus on measures for research studies at first, okay? So there are currently no treatments specifically approved by the FDA for NALCN channel-related diseases, but therapies are on the horizon, right? This is really exciting. And so we need to have good measures for natural history studies and for use in clinical trials. And this is really critical to test whether new treatments work. If we don't have good measures, treatments that work may not be approved. And this would be horrible, right? And so we really need to have good outcome measures. And how do we develop good measures? Well, as we know, the FDA is the one who approves new medicines, right? And so what's great is that they have a guidance series that helps, industry, it helps scientists, it helps clinicians understand, the steps we need to take in order to develop novel treatments. And they have a whole guidance series on how we take a patient-focused approach to drug development. And much of those guidances are focused on outcome measure development. And so they say that really patient-focused drug development is a systematic approach to help ensure that patients' experiences, perspectives, needs, and priorities are captured and meaningfully incorporated into drug development and evaluation. As experts in what it's like to live with their condition, patients are uniquely positioned to inform the understanding of the therapeutic context for drug development and evaluation. So this is what FDA says. So obviously, including patients and co-designing research together is critically important for so many reasons. It makes it better. But it's also like the FDA is saying this, and we can't ignore it, right? Like this is part of the process for coming up with new treatments. So you all are so critical, and the FDA agrees with that, which is a good thing. So I hope I've convinced you that, measures are important for a lot of reasons, for clinical care, for clinical trials. But what are the things that we should measure, right? We really should measure things that matter most to patients. Right? These are the aspects of the condition that treatments should target, right? And so what are the most important things to patients, and how do we measure those things? Well, so the FDA has given us a really nice roadmap in one of their guidances. It's called the Roadmap to Patient-Focused Outcome Measurement in Clinical Trials. And so this is really what I use to do all of my work. This is what me and my team use to do all of our research, how we shape everything that we do, because our main goal is to develop outcome measures that can be used in clinical trials. So we're going to kind of break down each step along this process, starting with really just understanding the topics that are most pertinent and meaningful for patients, all the way to developing measures that are ready for clinical trials. And I'm going to give you some examples from my work that kind of illustrate different ways that we can tackle this. One quick point I want to mention is that a lot of times in research, as researchers, we're trained to use quantitative methods, right? So that means numbers and comparing numbers. But qualitative methods are really important too. This is really helpful to understand the rich patient experience to help inform our work. And actually, I had a meeting with the FDA earlier this year, and they even said directly to me, you must have good qualitative data. Good quantitative work will not solve the problems of poor qualitative work. And this is because from a quantitative perspective, again, we work in numbers, right? But with a qualitative perspective, it gives us an opportunity to have more one-on-one or, focus group kind of conversations with families to really get on a deep, rich level about how patients are experiencing, the condition, how it impacts daily life, how it impacts the rest of the family, right? And so this is kind of a plug for, as scientists, I think we need to start partnering more with our qualitative methodologists to really do this good patient-focused work. Okay, so the first two steps, the red and the green, and that kind of roadmap to patient-focused drug development, the first one is, again, we've talked about this already, the importance of natural history studies is critical. And then also understanding the conceptual model of the condition. So what are all the symptoms and the pieces that kind of make up a condition, and how do they impact quality of life? The next step is in green here, so really understanding the concepts of interest, and that's abbreviated as COI, or another, that's just a fancy word for outcomes, right, or the domains that matter most to patients, right? So a COI or an outcome is an aspect of an individual's experience or clinical, biological, physical, or functional state that an outcome measure is intended to capture. right? And so FDA says that for clinical trials, we should select outcomes that reflect an aspect of the patient, aspect of health that's important to patients, right? And so that's really important. And so now I'm going to just walk through a few examples of quantitative and qualitative patient-powered ways to capture patient experience data to inform the understanding of the condition and identifying those kind of COIs or outcomes that are most critical. So some of my work is done with the Inchstone project, which I'll talk more about in a minute, but the idea comes from, these kids are making inchstones rather than milestones, right? And those inchstones really matter, and we need to be able to capture and measure them. So we did a survey, actually very similar to the survey that's launching here. I know there's a poster out there with a QR code where you can actually complete the survey. So we did a survey across 267 caregivers of individuals with various kinds of neurodevelopmental disorders, but that are presenting more in the severe to profound range, okay? So, and we had a whole list of different kind of areas that may be of priority, and we asked caregivers to rate, what are the top impacts, right, to quality of life. And you'll see at the bottom here, I know that the text is small, but really what came to the top as top impacts were expressive communication, receptive communication, problem solving, which is an aspect of cognition, as well as gross motor. What I think is really interesting is that this study was transdiagnostic, right? So it's not specific to one rare disorder. But what's really neat is you guys have your priority survey. Now it would be interesting to compare, how does NALCN related disorder compare to kind of the overall what we're finding through the Inchstone project across many severe NDDs. I will say there was some variability in terms of top impacts and priorities. I'll say for individuals who are most severely affected, gross motor and fine motor were bigger priorities, and I think that makes sense. These are probably kids that have more difficulty with mobility and use of their hands. And then what was really interesting is as functional severity decreased, behavior became a bigger priority. And to me, this makes sense, right? Because if you've got if you're a little bit higher functioning, if you kind of can move your body in ways that are, volitional, and I think that, you're more likely to engage in the ability to engage in things that are not so great, like self-injury or aggression towards others or property destruction or elopement, right? And so that was a bigger priority for those who were a little bit less severe. But again, the whole sample was a very severe group. I have to kind of give that caveat. But this is really important because it's starting to help our group know that we need to focus on, the expressive, receptive communication, the cognition pieces, and the gross motor when we're thinking about what measures to develop. And like I said, our Inchstone project is very patient. We're working together with patients. It's really patient-led, which I'll explain in a moment. But because we're partnering so closely with patients, we want to make sure that we're giving back data very quickly to our patients that are participating. And so for our top gene groups that participated in this big survey, we created these really nice infographics that gave back the priorities and the impacts and kind of different unique information that we found about each of these patient groups in an easily digestible way. So this is just a plug, for researchers. I think giving the data back to the community in this kind of easily digestible way can be really helpful for increasing engagement. So this is also from that big survey that we did with the caregivers of those with more severe NDDs. We started to also look at what are the predictors of quality of life, because the things that are predicting quality of life are probably really important things to measure, right? And so what we did was we put in a model many different kind of medical factors and functional factors, and we said, okay, what is the best predictor of lower and higher quality of life? And what was interesting is actually cognition on a measure called the Developmental Profile 4, which is a caregiver-reported questionnaire, was the biggest predictor of low versus high quality of life. So that tells us cognition's important, right? So more evidence towards looking at cognition. But what I want to mention is the score that really split low versus high quality of life was a raw score of 4. Okay, so on this tool, that's a pretty low score. And so when you look at the items around a score of 4, they're related to foundational aspects of cognition, like are you alert? Are you aware of your environment? Are you paying attention to to what's going on around you. And so that was really, really interesting to us because a lot of our cognitive measures don't really hone in on those really foundational aspects of cognition. So we need to be developing tools that are inclusive of those foundational aspects to make sure that we're really reaching what's most meaningful for this population in particular. And what you'll see on the right, there's like a lot of dots and things. On the bottom there is the scores on the DP4 going from lowest on the left to highest on the right. So and what you'll notice is on the y-axis, so on the vertical axis, is like increases in quality of life. And what you'll see is kind of at the low end of the DP4 is where you're seeing that really steep increase in quality of life. Another thing that we're learning from this data is that for this population, really small changes in cognition can be really meaningful for these patients in terms of their quality of life. So again, this is telling our group that we need to be really mindful that those small changes, even though they may seem really small, could have really big impact for this particular group of kids. And so we need to be making sure we're capturing small changes in the measures that we have. Another way we're capturing kind of concepts or outcomes of interest is just simply by, this is more qualitative, so just simply asking, how do you know your child's having a good day? How do you know your child's having a bad day? And what was really neat is if you look at these word clouds, they're actually data-driven. So when we ask caregivers about how do you know your child's having a good day, a lot of things like smiling, laughing, of course, the emotional piece is really, really important. But also about a third of caregivers reported, that they're awake, they're alert, they're engaged, they're paying attention. So again, more evidence to those foundational aspects of cognition. All right, so now moving to a different population. So I work closely with the ASXL Foundation. This is the condition that my brother has. And so one of the directors of the foundation, they actually, even before I really got involved in this group, they wanted to put together a survey to understand priorities. But they really wanted to try to reach as many families as possible in a short period of time. So they developed the survey to be very brief. It was literally just, what's the top symptom that you would want treated, for your child? And that was basically it. And so in 2 weeks, they got over 200 responses. And what came to the top for this population was cognition communication, gastrointestinal symptoms, and severe behavior, right? And so while we got a lot of information, it wasn't very deep information, right? And so now we utilize this to get a grant through PCORI for a patient engagement award, which allowed us to partner even more with patients to have you all sitting at the table with us and actually paying you for doing so. And being partners in research, which is a really cool funding mechanism. I'm happy to talk to anyone here more about that. And that led us to get PCORI funding. So at our conference last year in July, we were able to have 40 participants participate in 15 focus groups where we really honed in on neurodevelopment, GI symptoms, and behavior. And we asked caregivers, tell us about the lived experience. What does a day in the life look like related to these different areas, right? And how do they impact daily life? How do they impact family life? And that was, what would a meaningful change look like in these symptoms? So we have really rich qualitative information that is going to help us understand, we know behavior is a priority, but what aspects of a behavior are the priority, right? And those are the things we need to make sure we include in our measures that we're developing. Okay, so my question to you all is, what are those COIs or outcomes for NALCN channel-related diseases? I think you guys are well on your way, just seeing the priority survey and the natural history study. These are all ways that we can gather information. But one challenge to consider across neurodevelopmental disabilities is, relevant outcomes may differ based on patient factors, as I mentioned, right? And things like age or ability level. But conditions are often heterogeneous, right? And so, and as I've heard from this population, about this population as well, right? And so my kind of challenge to you all is, I think, start to think about, are there concepts or outcomes that may span the whole population, right? Because those are the things that I think that we would be getting kind of the most out of if we target those things in terms of measure development and selection, because those are the things that we would want to target in treatments, and so those are the things that we need to develop the measures for to see change in a clinical trial. So I know that that's a really hard task, but I think that that's an important task, right, to be efficient. Make sure we're reaching as many patients as possible within the population. Okay, so we need to measure outcomes that are important to patients, right? So I may be biased as a neuropsychologist, but I will say the data do show across many neurodevelopmental, neurogenetic conditions, neurodevelopment does seem to be pretty important, right? Things like cognition, communication. But are there outcome measures that we have for neurodevelopment? Are they relevant? Are they valid, which is a fancy term for are they good? Are they sensitive to meaningful differences across groups, so across different genetic conditions or across different phenotypes within the same condition? And are they sensitive to meaningful change? So if we put you, in a treatment trial, are they going to capture those small but meaningful changes for all patients impacted, right? That's the goal. That's the ideal. I can tell you as a neuropsychologist, and many of you guys have probably had your child evaluated maybe through a developmental pediatrician or through a psychologist or through school or even a neuropsychologist. For some of our kids, there's a lot of barriers to good measurement of neurodevelopmental outcomes, right? So a lot of our tools don't accommodate for severe impairments in sensory or motor, communication, and attention. AAC is often not something we can consider when we're scoring the measures, that's how these kids might communicate, and so we need to be giving them credit, right? Don't accommodate for compensatory strategies, right? So I just mentioned that. Limitations of out-of-age tools. So unfortunately, some of the tools that we have to use for those who are, more severe or profoundly impacted, are really meant for individuals, birth to age 3. And so I may see a 20-year-old who, is functioning more in kind of early on in development, but I'm giving, a task with rubber duckies and peekaboo. Like some 20-year-olds might like that stuff, but not everybody does. And so we need to be thinking about making sure we develop tools that are really appropriate for everyone who we intend to measure in the population. And then, again, I mentioned this, lack of tools that really capture the granular, meaningful changes. Okay. So again, we need these tools for clinical trial readiness and also, of course, for individual care of your child. All right, this is a really nice analogy that one of my mentors has made that just kind of illustrates this concept, right? So imagine you have a new baby mouse and you bring him home and you put him on your bathroom scale and, he weighs 0 pounds and you feed the mouse and you watch him grow and you're really excited. And then, a month later, he's clearly bigger, right? And you put him on the scale, but it's still at 0, right? So this bathroom scale is the wrong measure for this baby mouse. And so this is an analogy just to kind of illustrate we need the right measures to get at these granular changes that are clearly meaningful. Okay, so the next step in that FDA roadmap towards clinical outcome measurement that's patient-focused, they talk about clinical outcome assessments, or COAs. These are the actual measures, right? So in a clinical trial, COAs measure outcomes that describe or reflect how a patient feels, functions, or survives. There's many different types of COAs, so patient-reported, observer-reported, so like a caregiver reporting on their child, for example, clinician-reported, so if I rate a child on a scale of severity, and then performance, so if I administer like a communication test or a IQ test or something like that. So there's different ways that we can measure things. And again, the FDA emphasizes this, the only way that these outcome measures are going to be valid or good is by partnering with patients and developing them because, and during measure validation, which basically means assessing whether a measure is good. And just a little vocabulary, a lot of you may have heard of this term endpoint, right? And you may have also heard, clinical outcome assessments and outcomes. It's kind of like alphabet soup here with all the acronyms and things. So this is just a slide to kind of clarify this a little bit. So we have concepts or outcomes, and then we measure those outcomes using clinical outcome assessments, right? And clinical outcome assessments give us endpoints. An endpoint is really a precisely defined variable intended to reflect an outcome of interest that's statistically analyzed to address a research question, okay? So that's like the number piece, okay? So I just wanted to put that up there because it confuses me at times too. And actually, I don't think that there's like kind of international consensus on these terms. This is really based on kind of the FDA's guidance. Okay, so now I want to give just quickly some examples of patient-powered efforts to validate patient-focused clinical outcome assessments. So I mentioned earlier I'm a part of the Inchstone Project, and so the goal of the Inchstone Project is to collaborate with patients to develop patient-focused outcome measures that capture relevant aspects of functioning and meaningful change in individuals with severe impairments associated with epilepsy and/or a genetic cause. We are a multi-interest holder team science approach. So those who started it were patient advocates. So Gabi Koneker and Jayetta Hecker are caregivers, and they run the Decoding Developmental Epilepsies Foundation. And then we are a team of psychologists as well as other habilitative and rehabilitative therapists. So we've got physical therapy, we've got speech language therapy, we have a CVI or vision specialist as a part of our team. And so we all work together. We meet every single week, multiple times a week, to really be working on this stuff. And so we work together, and we're really truly, we partner with other patient advocates, we partner with other scientists, we have other advisors who've been involved in industry. We also have some industry partners as well, we meet with quarterly, and we share what we've been working on, and we get feedback from them as well. So that has been really, really interesting to hear about kind of what does industry need in terms of their outcome measures to demonstrate drug efficacy. So we are all a team working together. And truly, this is patient advocate-led initiative. I can tell you this is a paper that really illustrates our work, which is available. It's actually open access, so anyone could access it, and I'm happy to share it with you guys. But I just want to mention the first two authors are patient advocates, right? So we really try to make sure that the community knows we are all sitting at the table together in this work. And that is so critical to the success of the Inchstone Project. So some of the ways that we are really validating or making sure these measures are good that we're developing is through content validity studies. So, we might give a measure that either we're developing or a measure that exists already to a group of caregivers, and we ask them questions like, are these questions easy to understand, right? Are these questions relevant to your child? Was there anything missing from the questionnaire that's really important? And sometimes we'll have caregivers actually, I do this with my studies, is like I have them fill out the questionnaire and just talk it through out loud, right? So I can really learn their thought process and to understand, are they interpreting these questions in the way that they were kind of intended to be interpreted? And if not, that's a problem, right? And so we might need to modify that tool. So these questions really help ensure we're measuring what we think we're measuring, and again, we can't do the work without the patients. This is an example of a study that we're doing with the Developmental Profile 4. That's a measure I mentioned earlier. It's a parent-caregiver questionnaire. Some of you may have filled it out, through your child's school or a psychologist or a therapy provider. It gets at different domains like cognition, adaptive functioning, communication, and motor, and it's for birth through 21 years. It takes about 15 minutes to complete, so it's pretty quick. So we think it is standardized. It has good psychometric properties, at least in terms of how it was developed. But the problem is that it was developed for very few individuals with intellectual disability in that standardization sample. So that's a problem. And so we really sought out to evaluate, okay, is this tool appropriate for those with, more severe impairments? And so we had a sample of 219 caregivers fill this out for us, and we did some, fancy statistics that I can't do. My colleagues, my collaborators do, but they told me that based on the models that they ran, it does look like it's pretty good. There are minimal floor effects. We asked, which means that parents were able to endorse at least some items, which is a great thing, because we don't want to give any measures to families where they can't even, they can't say that their child is doing a skill. That's not what we want, right? We want parents to show their child's abilities. That is so critical. And so one of the big pieces I wanted to mention is that this content validity. So we actually asked caregivers to give us feedback through focus groups. Like, what did you think of this measure? And they said they felt that it was more relevant to their child compared to many other forms. They could answer yes more often than other measures, but they didn't like the yes-no format. We learned that caregivers like to have a middle ground, right, a sometimes. And so that's something that we might do we're going to utilize that information and potentially modify it in the future. Kind of coming to the end here, but what's really important is that clinical outcome assessments need to be able to capture meaningful changes. I think I mentioned this earlier, right? And so, in a trial, they'll compare, on the numbers, are those in the treatment group doing better than those in, the not treatment group, right? If we're looking at a drug that's supposed to improve something, right? Certainly, you can compare statistically, but even if it's significant, was that difference meaningful, right? Or are there meaningful changes happening that aren't statistically significant? This would be a problem, right? And so we need to make sure our measures capture meaningful change, which is the meaningful difference from the previous state as viewed by the patient or the caregiver. So I think something to consider is that many of our neurodevelopmental measures are unable to capture those small, meaningful changes. So we need to do better. And so one approach our group has used is through qualitative methods, again, interviews and focus groups, and open-ended, open text responses on surveys to get a better understanding of what does a meaningful change look like, right? And so we did a pilot study in SCN2A related disorder. This is a different channelopathy. And we asked caregivers, okay, in 4 different functional areas, I think it was like gross motor, fine motor, feeding and communication, what would a meaningful change look like for your child? And again, this was in a more kind of severe neurodevelopmental disability population. And so we were able to split the group into kind of relatively lower and higher functioning groups. And what was really interesting from this study is that we learned that those individuals, the caregivers of those who were in the more severe group, shared that smaller changes would be meaningful compared to the relatively higher functioning group. Those caregivers wanted to see a bigger change in those areas, and that would be considered meaningful. So kind of those differences in baseline characteristics are really important. The other interesting thing with this study, we also asked caregivers to tell us about worthwhile change. So essentially we said, okay, what would be a meaningful change in these areas if your child was enrolled in a small molecule trial with low risks versus a gene therapy trial with potentially higher risks, okay? And what was interesting is the caregivers across the board wanted to see a bigger change, the more risk associated with the trial, okay? And so that was really, really important to document. Because meaningful change isn't always looked at that way. It's kind of what initially we learned about when we were initially learning about what meaningful change is and kind of how FDA looks at that, it was sort of like it was supposed to be the same no matter the baseline characteristics of the patient. But this data tells us that that might be different based on the risk and different patient level factors. And then the other piece is we just asked in our big survey of over 200 caregivers of those with severe NDDs, we asked just generally for your top priorities for treatment, what would be a meaningful change? And there was a lot of concordance across communication preferences, so the capacity to communicate preferences and emotions, gain sitting and standing and walking skills, being able to grasp objects for play, eat foods without choking or using utensils. And then we asked, why would these changes be meaningful for your particular child? And there was a lot of coalescing around kind of impact to health, independence, and safety, reduce kind of the burden of care regimens, and also increasing quality of life. So those were the motivations as to why these changes would be meaningful. All right, and then kind of lastly here, I've talked a lot about patient engagement in research, right? And so how can I engage as a patient or family member? How can I engage patients and families as a researcher, right? I think you're here, so patient advocacy groups, connecting with patient advocacy groups is critical. I think as a researcher, definitely making sure that for your studies, you have a community board that can weigh in on your decisions as a researcher along the way. I have these for several of my projects, and I'm able to go to caregivers and say, hey, does this questionnaire, do you understand these questions, or am I totally missing the mark here? Or can you, and sometimes it's just, they're like, oh, if you just change this word, now it makes a lot more sense. And it's so nice to have in real time the feedback loop of working with the community board. So I would definitely advocate for that. And I mentioned earlier PCORI Engagement Awards. So the goal of this funding mechanism is really to build the capacity and skills of patients, families, caregivers, and the broader healthcare community to engage in research. And there's actually funds set aside through these projects for patients to get involved and have a seat at the table, which is really, really amazing. And so, again, happy to talk to anyone after this about that. How you apply for these, it can be kind of very different from a typical NIH grant. And so it's kind of like a code you have to crack in terms of how you write that. And again, I'm happy to be a resource for anyone here interested. And then, of course, as patients, offering to be a part of these community boards or being a part of the team of the PCORI Awards. And again, I'm just another plug for qualitative data is really, really important. So big message here, we have to bring together clinicians, researchers, patients, caregivers very early on to maximize the likelihood of developing tools and measures that are valid and will capture really meaningful outcomes for clinical care and for clinical trials. And the big picture here is, your voice really matters as patients, and that's really what's going to move the field forward. So thank you so much for listening, and yeah, happy to talk more.
Thank you so much. I have so many questions because I'm not gonna ask them, but I'm gonna talk to you afterwards, so I don't waste the time.
Should I stay up here? Okay.
That'd be great. Not a question, but I love calling it patient-powered research. Thank you so much for adding that term to our community. And with that, do you have any specific suggestions after being with us for a couple of days on how maybe we could do a better job of patient powering our research?
Yeah. I think you guys are doing a fantastic job. Like, you guys are moving very, very quickly, and I think that is just amazing. Like I said, I've been to a lot of these conferences, and I'm so impressed by you guys in particular. Yeah, I think definitely, I don't know, do you guys have kind of a steering committee? That could be something. I don't know if you do have that yet. You maybe, I don't.
I wrote that down. I know we've discussed doing a patient advisory board or a family board. I think it's in our next 6 months.
There's so much to do. There's so much to do, but that has been crucial. For me as a researcher, it's been so cool. We also, for one of the conditions I work with, we have a natural history study, and we actually have a steering committee for the natural history study. And what's so cool is that the committee is composed of patients, caregivers, clinicians, scientists. And what's neat is that anytime anyone else wants to use the data, they put in a request to that board, and they review the request and make sure that the way they want to use that data is consistent with kind of the patient and the patient's kind of perspectives on how that data should be used. And also, that group is really helpful for just, again, throwing ideas to, if I'm adding a new measure, or if I'm interested in a new domain, getting immediate feedback from them is great. Even so, as a neuropsychologist, I also, when I do research, if I do an IQ test or a communication test, I provide a score summary for the families to have. It's not the same as a clinical report, but it's a score summary, so they can take that and bring that to their medical team or their educational team. And even recently, I was asking this committee, hey, can you look at my template? Is this digestible, right, to families? Because I want to make sure that they're actually using this, right? This is something that they get from doing this research and participating. I want to make sure that they're going to use it, right? And so I got some great feedback, just word tweaks and ways to make it simpler. So that has been one of the biggest helps, I think, to moving the needle forward. Yeah.
Thank you. I know our patient-oriented outcome survey, which we launched this weekend. The QR code is on a poster over here. I sent it to some families, and I was like, let me know if you have feedback. But it would be so great to formalize that with you all. And so, over the course of today, we're talking about ways to get involved. And so, for any families that want to join in a more official way, such as joining either our ambassador group, which we've talked about in the past, or a patient advisory group, then we would love to have you. Other questions? Thanks.
Great presentation. Thank you so much for the information. And my question is on the personal side about being a sibling of your brother with the rare disease. Did you have a natural inclination to go into medicine and to study this, or do you feel like it was because of his disease?
Yeah, that's a great question. So from very early, like I have a flashbulb memory to the day he got diagnosed with autism. And I was 9 years old at the time. And I remember hearing that news, and the way the information was delivered was not great. Like he's probably never going to talk again because he had a regression, and kind of doomsday. And I was like, oh my gosh. And I just remember in the moment, like thinking to myself, like, okay, no, we're gonna help you get through. We're gonna help you talk again, right? And so I think like that was a very formative moment for me, right? Like, and I'm like, okay. So I think that was really has inspired me to think about not necessarily going in medicine, but I wanted to do something that helped him and kids like him, right? And so just that was always kind of on my mind. And then through school, I just started to really like neuroscience, and kind of was like, oh yeah, I can do this within that area, right? And so kept kind of honing in as each stage in my high school and college, and afterwards I worked as a research coordinator at Seaver Autism Center in New York, and they were focused on neurogenetics, and I'm like, oh, this is cool, right? And so that each kind of step kind of guided me down a path which was fueled by my own unique interests, but always kind of in the knowing that I wanted to do something within my own interests that would support and would help kind of the realm of neurodevelopmental disabilities. So yeah.
Carolyn's question kind of triggered another sibling
Sure.
question. We have a 15-year-old son, and I always wonder like what it's like for him and what can we do as parents. And I'm just curious, like, what was helpful for you growing up with a special needs sibling, and what wasn't helpful, or
That's a great question. So I think, first of all, I want to say that I recently did, through Kennedy Krieger, we have some really nice, we have this KIND curriculum, which is a series of webinars for families that's free, and it covers a range of topics, and one of the topics is on siblings, and I did that one, and so I can send it to you guys, the link. It's again, free for everyone. And so there's lots of rich resources there. And actually in that presentation, I talk a little bit about the research around like what's helpful, what's not helpful. But I can just tell you from kind of the biggest piece I've took from the research and also my personal experience is, just creating little opportunities along the way that really make the sibling feel special and that they get to do something. And it doesn't need to be a grand, big thing. It's even like, I remember my mom used to tell me like, this week, I think it was my brother maybe had a lot of appointments or something, and they were like, this weekend you get to go spend with like your aunt, and it's going to be an aunt weekend, and your aunt's going to plan a bunch of fun activities, and like that was just so exciting, and I felt so special, right, that I got to go and have a whole weekend with my aunt. So it was something that was very practical, right, but like kind of they hyped it up, and I felt really special. So I think that making little opportunities for the sibling to just feel special could be and the research kind of backs that up too. So when I was doing my own research for that presentation, I was like, oh my gosh, like I can totally relate to that, So
That's really helpful. Even coming here this week, I was like, do you want to go? He's like, no, I don't want to listen to a bunch of research, and so, but then the whole week I felt bad that we've been able to be here and it's all about her and what can I do to compensate for him, and so,
just little things to make them feel special.
Any other hands? I've actually used that curriculum.
You have?
Cool. In my other job, I was teaching a webinar to teachers, and it was sponsored by PBS, and I used that. It was on I was on kindness in school, and I used it. So that's so cool.
Very cool.
Starstruck.
Yes.
Okay, can I call people for photo? Okay, thank you so much.
Thank you all.
Yes, that was incredible. I'm just so glad there's so many patient families in the room right now to hear that, and I even have survey fatigue, and I'm going to go to my computer right now and fill out all the surveys that I haven't filled out yet. Well, maybe tomorrow after I sleep. So we are going to take a photo. We kept pushing it off, but we want to capture how many people are still here. I think for ease, we'll stay in the room.
Yeah, we're going to stay in this room.
we're going to use our backdrop. So head on up. Some can stand on the stage to help us get nice and close.
Yeah, and if you,
Tall in the back.
yeah, so floor to back.
Let's ask if that is a thing. It's wider. All right, we're going to take a quick 10-minute break and restart at 10 a.m. to finish out our day. Thanks, everyone.
is. Okay. Hello? All right. Can you hold this one? Don't touch your mouth. Okay. Say hello, everybody. We're going to get started soon.
Eat the tartar too.
Thank you. You say hello. Hello, everybody. My name's James. Go ahead.
Eat the tartar too.
Thank you. Good job. Good job, James. I don't think this reaches to people out in the room, but maybe.
You're good. I can hear you.
Okay. Okay. Go ahead. Jeremy's asking for 3 minutes, so I'm going to kill some time for 3 minutes. I will probably steal some people's thunder by skipping ahead to some announcements, but we received a lot of positive feedback on our shirts. We will be releasing details on how to buy more Channeling Hope merchandise in the next month.
More emails from me.
Yay! More emails from
I
Emily.
know you're going to miss them, so just keep sending.
Yeah, at home I have coffee mugs, water bottles, sweaters, beanies, even though I live in Texas and I think I've only worn it once. Different rounds of shirts, polos, regular shirts. I got a sweater this time. We got hats. Oh, nice sweatshirt. Suzanne's friend actually made the logo, and we were like, yo, this is just to get us started. It can change later, but I don't see it ever changing now. Although I'll have to admit, it took me a while to realize that our double helix was a C. I just thought it was pretty. All right, what are some other ways we can kill time? Any other announcements, Emily, that we can make now instead of later while we're waiting for Jeremy?
If you want to run out and put another sticker on the board to vote for your favorite session today, do that.
All right, we can stop killing time. Come on up, Jeremy.
Thank you all. Sorry for keeping you. I had to run to the bathroom quickly. Well, if it's possible to get started. Awesome. So I'm just going to share some of our big picture scientific strategy and viewpoints. This is all up for feedback and would love any suggestions, but just wanted to share with the community how we've been thinking and approaching things. So overall, our philosophy and approach has been to move forward faster, and we'll do so by working together. And so towards those goals, we've been really advocating for openly available resources and making things publicly accessible and doing everything we can to do so, and if needed, making sure that we own the data so we can make sure it's publicly accessible and it doesn't get stuck in silos based on regulatory rules at certain institutions or companies. By fostering as many collaborations as we can and continuing to do so. And this is where the community is really helpful in meeting others, making those collaborations, building bridges. And then synergizing with other ultra-rare disease groups and networks. We're not in this alone, and we can use a lot of shared resources, expertise, and infrastructure to do so. And so we've been really fortunate to get to work within the Rare as One network with other ultra-rare disease groups, and particularly with the channelopathies organizations. And we've learned a ton from them. And similarly with Combined Brain through the Neurodevelopmental Disease Network, and we've been working with Combined Brain for the natural history study, the biorepository, and many other resources where there's multiple ultra-rare disease groups pooling resources, expertise, samples to work together towards shared goals. And so just to reflect back, so at the last conference, I had shared, this is going back to the opening on Friday, that there was 2 major scientific goals and gaps identified. The first was generating patient-derived pluripotent stem cells, and the second was drug discovery for high-throughput screening to identify treatments. And so just to share updates on that, and this is a busy slide, but just to provide an overview for the community on what we've been working on. So thanks to the amazing team at Baylor College of Medicine and Texas Children's, we are fortunate they were open to partnering with us to develop the first patient-derived iPSCs. The first, the D600 variant D600H variant is publicly available now at the NIH NIGMS biorepository. And then the second one, the I322T variant, will soon be available there. They accepted it into the repository, and so we're hoping to send the sample there, and they'll do their quality control and then make it publicly accessible. So for anyone interested, so this is the website anyone can go to order the iPSC line, and they make it the benefits of doing it through this, and we looked at many different biorepository options, and we are fortunate to get accepted to this one with Coriell because it's NIH funded, and because of that, they cover all the costs for expanding the lines, and it's a top-line biorepository as well. So we have quality at an affordable price point for us, which is amazing because it was free that we got accepted into it. And so this is now publicly available for researchers for $1,000 to $2,000, which is pretty incredible for an iPSC line. Our next steps are to now take the iPSCs to differentiate and derive neurons, and then to test those neurons to understand those phenotypes and to use those towards research. So like Dr. Callan presented yesterday, we're considering if through the Baylor team and the core that they're setting up there to do so, but we'd really love how to better use these patient-derived stem cell lines to better foster the research community being able to use them for treatments. In addition, we're incredibly thankful for the work of Dr. Ritter and Dr. Jacobson, who presented here, their work on patient-derived iPSCs, and then as well as CRISPR-edited iPSCs for CLIFAD as well as for IHPRF1. And so they gave some really excellent presentations on this here at the conference, and they have performed the neuronal differentiation and the initial characterization as well, which is incredibly valuable. And this work has been supported by the Dr. Pless's lab and team. And so please, when you see them, give them a huge round of applause and a huge thank you for their incredible efforts in this. The second priority identified at the last conference was drug discovery with high-throughput screening to identify treatments. And so Dr. Zen presented really amazing work at the conference here on their now 10-year program to perform drug repurposing screening. Supported by the Ibajan team, and Tiandu gave a really excellent presentation on this as well and the mouse model that they've used for this. And so they presented work identifying lead candidates, nifapam, for decreasing the leak for gain of function, so potentially as a lead therapeutic candidate for CLIFAD, as well as amlodipine and thinking about calcium channel blockers as potential treatments for loss of function. Variants are IHPRF1 and 2. And so really excited to help support this work going forward. And then we presented yesterday morning our multidisciplinary collaboration to lead drug discovery for these diseases. And so we performed the initial screening on an FDA-approved compound library and identified some initial lead candidates, but hope to use this to identify novel candidates as well going forward, and to be able to replicate this pipeline, to be able to test and validate other treatment and lead therapeutic candidates. And this has been funded by UT Health San Antonio through pilot awards and sponsored by Channeling Hope Foundation. When on Friday as well, I shared some of the lessons that learned in the process and what's so important to be able to move forward to therapies. So first, growing and engaging our community. Data, so acquiring data to really understand the natural history, the meaningful clinical outcomes in a biorepository and biomarkers that are so important for clinical trials. And then clinical trial readiness, getting the community and data ready and prepared to be able to move forward to clinical trials once we have validated lead treatment candidates. And so I'm going to start with the first one, which is how do we grow our community? And so we're incredibly thankful that GeneDx, which is the largest genetic testing company here in the U.S., was willing to share some of their testing data with us for the conference to share what they found. So GeneDx accounts for probably about 80% of the genetic testing in the U.S. And so they shared their Gene Discover snapshot with us. So this is based on their GeneDx Discover platform from September of this year, and going back as far as 2015 for GeneDx. This is the most widely used whole exome sequencing company. And they shared the genes associated with autosomal dominant and autosomal recessive mutations in the NALCN gene, in UNC79 gene, as well as for UNC80 gene. And so we're very thankful for the GeneDx team for pulling this data together for us to help inform us about our community. And I'll preface, this is just in the US. We don't have data internationally because GeneDx just offers this testing in the US, but would love to learn more internationally. First, for NALCN autosomal dominant mutation, so what's associated with Clifford syndrome. So what we learned here, and this is really that there's been 182 patients diagnosed in the US, and that number's doubled over the last 3 years. So showing this is becoming more and more common as more and more people get testing. So this is showing the age of testing. This is showing the gender, so males and females, and this is showing the ethnicity based on the genetic analyses. But what's meaningful to me is looking at the age. So this is the age at testing, and this is the individual's current age. And what we see is that at testing, most children are tested in childhood is when it first, but there's patients as old as, the oldest age group there is up to age 64. So telling us that this isn't just a childhood disease, it's also affecting adults. And so we really need to encourage really more widespread whole exome sequencing and genetic testing, even for adults with intellectual disability and other cognitive disorders. We see that the patients are spread across the U.S., many in the Northeast, Florida, Texas, and California as being the regions thus far with the highest frequency of diagnoses. For NALCN mutations that are autosomal recessive, so associated with IHPRF1, there's 12 patients identified in the U.S. Most were in early diagnosed in childhood, and we see as well that the adult patients up to age 24 was the oldest age group for patients diagnosed with IHPRF1. For IHPRF2, so these are due to mutations, autosomal recessive mutations in the UNC80 gene, there was 13 patients in the U.S. Diagnosed or identified. And what I should preface, this map shows where they were diagnosed, so it doesn't mean where they're currently living. This is just where the test was initially sent from, because that's what they have the data on. And so what they, similarly for IHPRF2, most are diagnosed in childhood, but there are adult patients, or I would say older children up to age 17. And then this was particularly new data to me was seeing for UNC70 related mutations. So these are typically due to mutations in the UNC79 related gene. And this syndrome, we saw some of the data presented here, was first identified and published in 2023, so 2 years ago. And so what we see here is this wasn't diagnosed prior to then, but in the last 2 years, there's 30 individuals identified with UNC79 related disorders. So presumably many more as more and more testing comes out. So that was surprising, recognizing this seems to be the second highest frequency diagnosis for NALCN channel related disorders, and presumably more and more as it gets included into the genetic testing. Most are diagnosed in early childhood, and the oldest adult patient was in the age bracket up to age 24. And so growing our community. So GeneDx has created a Genome Medical where they provide virtual genetic counseling and testing for other families with that have indications for getting genetic testing, meaning they don't need to see a specialist or be at a specialty center to get the genetic counseling and testing. So it's a program for all of these ultra-rare diseases and neurogenetic diseases to grow their community. And so if you know of those near you or in regions where they might not have ready access to a specialist for genetic testing, this is an option that they created to foster that genetic testing. The second priority about community, one was growing, but then it's so important to also engage the community and to have ways to measure and quantify that engagement. So when talking to investors, when talking to pharmaceutical companies, we can share this is the number of people engaged. And so to try and start to acquire that data, we developed the contact registry through Channeling Hope Foundation that Emily's going to be sharing more information on for signing up. But this is for families and patients, for scientists, for clinicians, for any supporters, and it's going to be how we keep track of those in our community and also keep track of how people want to be engaged. We want to meet you where you're at, whatever that might be. And so what we'll do is we'll use this to share updates and resources going forward in line with what you share you want to be contacted regarding. And the second points that were shared, so data, and clinical trial readiness. And I'm going to pull these together into one. So for clinical trial readiness, that's the idea in the concept and state of having validated clinical research tools, biomarkers, clinical outcomes, like we just heard a wonderful presentation on, and knowledge of the natural history of the disease and the communities and patient populations ready to design efficient clinical trials to be able to test treatments. So getting everything we need so that when a treatment's ready, we can go efficiently into testing it to see if it's a valuable treatment. And so this involves developing the clinical research tools like biomarkers and clinical outcomes and preparing the community as well for clinical trials down the road. And so just to describe it, so a big part of it is having quality data. So data is so important, and this is why we're so annoying in asking folks if willing to complete as many surveys as you're open to. So the data that Dr. Gail Nagel presented here was a clinical phenotype study. So what I'm showing here is this is the time over time, and this is symptoms or severity of the disease. So the clinical phenotype study is a cross-sectional study, meaning it's at one point in time. It tells us the symptoms and severity at that one time point. But what we'd like to do is understand the symptoms over time and how they may or may not change over time. And so to try and efficiently and cost-effectively address that gap while acquiring quality data. So first, we've partnered with the Citizen Health Platform for a retrospective natural history study. What this means is getting data from prior leading up to this current point in time. So acquiring all of that data, retrospective, so looking from the past. So this is a retrospective natural history study. And we partnered with the Clinical Health Platform because it's a platform that was developed for ultra-rare diseases to acquire, analyze, and consolidate all the prior medical records and data into a data set that can be used for analyses to understand this course. We don't have the means of doing this otherwise. So we are so thankful that Citizen Health created this platform for our community and other rare communities to do so. Typically, creating that data set cost about $50,000 to $100,000 to do so. And so we were incredibly fortunate to be awarded a grant where they'll create this data set for our community for free. And so they'll do it for up to 50 participants. Any participant can sign up for the Citizen Health Platform, but they'll be able to create this data set for our community for up to 50 in the US because they have to have access to the medical records. And so because of that, the data set would be created for participants in the US. And so we'd love to get as many families that are willing and interested into this data set And there's a deadline where they say after this point, we're not going to take any more families for creating this data set at the end of the year. So we'd say if you haven't signed up and if you're interested, we'd encourage you to sign up for the Citizen Health platform to help us to get this retrospective data. The next step would be to once we get the data set, to run the analyses to be able to look at the retrospective natural history study. That typically costs about $50,000 or so to hire a data analyst to analyze the data and visualize it. And so that's something we'll be working on as a next step. The second part of a natural history study is looking into the future, what's called a prospective natural history study. And we'd like to couple that retrospective with the prospective natural history data. So this is what the clinical research ID that Emily's going to talk more on does. It lets us, for one individual, align all of this data across time. And so at the study, we are incredibly fortunate and thankful to all of the families that participated and all of the researchers who helped in developing the natural history study protocol. And so we launched this first prospective natural history study here at the conference, including the in-person exams, photos, videos, and we're partnering with Combined Brain to use their Matrix platform to acquire the survey data. And so there's the in-person exam part here, and then for those as well, we'll ask you to complete these Matrix platform data so we can get all of the data together at one point in time. We use the Matrix platform for this because it was readily available, so it's much more cost-effective and efficient. We wouldn't be able to make this on our own. And second, they share the data with other neurogenetic and ultra-rare disease groups and platforms, so we can start to consolidate our data across groups to create really bigger power to be able to understand each of these diseases. So typically, starting a natural history study, so what happened here at the conference typically costs about $50,000 to $100,000 to do so. And so we were through Combined Brain, we're able to access the Matrix platform for it's about $10,000 a year to do so. And then for the conference, with all the staff and teams here, we're so incredibly generous with their time and volunteered to participate in this. So we were able to pull that off for less than $5,000. And that's a huge thanks to the Bigs and to UT Health San Antonio. But in the future, to be able to continue for multiple time points going forward, it is going we are going to have to raise funding to do so, either by applying for grants to do so or from fundraising. So typically these natural history studies cost about $50,000 to $100,000 a year. An important part of trying to make these more less burdensome and more cost-effective is to be able to offer the natural history study virtually going forward. So what I mean by this is here we're at the conference for the in-person exam, but the traveling is so hard for so many of us, and so being able to offer this as a virtual option going forward would be ideal. To be able to do that, we have to show that the data we acquire in person lines up with the data that can be acquired virtually. And so and our goal in the long term would be able to just continue these virtually going forward. So it's much easier for everyone to do so. And ideally every 6 months, so we have this data at every 6 month time points. In the short term, what we need to do to be able to prove that we can do that in the long term is to match up all the exams data that was acquired here in person with data that can be acquired virtually to show that the virtual option is a high quality option going forward. And so to do that, if validated, that would help to support our ability to use virtual exams going forward, and eventually for clinical trials, which would hopefully cut down the cost of running future clinical trials. And so for families that were so amazingly willing to engage in the in-person clinical exams here, we would request, if open to it, to engaging in another exam within the next month, ideally, virtually, so that we can match up that in-person and virtual data and see if it aligns, and if not, identify where the issues are. And then continuing with the clinical trial readiness. So for the natural history study, continuing to follow over time. And the reason that's important is that we want to understand what the natural history is, because when we're testing treatments, we have to prove that the treatment changes the natural history in a positive way. So to be able to prove that a treatment's effective, you have to understand what is the natural course of the disease. And this is why it's also so important to understand if there's worsening over time. Because if if there's worsening over time, an effective treatment might be keeping things stable. And we need to understand that. Because if not, then what would have been a treatment in one scenario wouldn't be considered an effective treatment in another scenario. So that's why this understanding the natural course of these diseases is so important. What we also talked about and just had a wonderful presentation on was the importance of identifying what are meaningful changes to families. What do you want to see a treatment doing for you and your family member affected by these diseases? And that's actually now required by the FDA to prove that a treatment's effective or not. And so to help understand within our community what are those important outcomes, we're launching a patient-oriented outcome survey that Cheyenne mentioned here as well to really understand that and to help us to design future clinical trials in alignment with what would works for you. And we'd love to be able to partner with you to do so for that. The last things I'll mention are biomarkers. So for biomarkers, these are a measurable characteristic of a disease. It can be a clinical symptom, a blood or other lab test, an EEG, or an imaging, some way to measure a disease. Biomarkers can be used to identify disease severity, to suggest what's coming in the future, of what's called a prognostic biomarker, to show that a treatment's affecting the disease target, so target engagement, which is required for clinical trials, and to show that a treatment's effective, so a surrogate biomarker. And that can be really helpful because it lets you test if a treatment's effective much faster and much more cost effectively than if you're just looking for a long-term change in symptoms. And so to help us learn about this, so we launched here the biomarker collection through the biorepository as a part of the natural history study. So this was funded by Channeling Hope Foundation and UT Health San Antonio in partnership with Combined Brain. In the future, we'd love to think about if it's possible for us to start to coalesce any prior EEGs or MRI data as well. And then after acquiring this data, our goal is to analyze it, to try and understand what are possible biomarkers. And this can be through transcriptomics, proteomics, metabolomics testing. It can be EEG and imaging analyses. Each of these analyses typically costs about $50,000 to $100,000. So that's just a broad picture and something that we're going to be hoping to move forward towards. So I'm going to go ahead and stop here and hand it over to Emily to talk through some of the ways that we're looking at implementing some of these strategies and big picture goals. Thank you.
Sorry for the delay. My conversation with Jeremy this morning had a whole bunch more stuff happening. So a little surprised, but excited to talk about our research roadmap. Which I hope everybody knows what I'm talking about when I say that, because you've gotten emails from me, and it's on our website, and Jill designed beautiful content for us. And this is totally my fault, because I literally just gave my slides, because doctors make the worst patients, and apparently organizers make the worst prepared speakers. So this should look familiar. This is our research roadmap. And we take this pretty seriously because the order is important. So we've talked a little bit about our CRID. And this is our clinical research ID that allows all of our patient data to be kept together and de-identified, which I know sounds kind of silly, but it's actually a really important step to make sure that the research that we're doing and the information that we're gathering from our patient community is usable when we go to the FDA and we want to do a clinical trial, or when we're ready to move on to drug repurposing. So that's why we have this as the first step in our system. And it looks like people are listening. So by my count, we have about 80% of our community already has their CRID. If you don't and you have questions about what it is, what it's used for, how it helps us make sure that your personal data is protected, but you're also able to share data with us, email me, Emily, at channeling.hope.org. The next thing on our research roadmap is our contact registry. So this helps us stay together as a group. That helps your email get on my email list, so you get 10,000 emails about a conference, or slightly fewer than 10,000 about research. And this graph shows us who's in the room. So based on who registered for this conference, we have about twice as many families and advocates as we have our scientists and our sponsors. But that still means that we have made meaningful bridges between our research and clinical teams and our patient and family and advocacy communities. The other thing that we can do with the data shared in the registry is understand a little bit more and display a little bit more about the experiences of individuals in our community. So you'll see here this new infographic about what it's like to have an NALCN related condition. And this was created in collaboration with a volunteer, and we'll be adding it to the website quite soon. And I have heard our families this week say, I want something that tells people about my child's condition in a really simple way. I want to be able to show them what it's like for us. So we'll be getting this up and ready in a form that is usable. You'll be able to email me and say, hey, can I get some infographics? And I will send them to you. The next stop on our research roadmap is citizen health. As Jeremy mentioned, we're really trying hard to get as many of our families involved with this who feel comfortable and confident doing so, get involved, and as soon as possible, so that we can have really robust data to share with the community and help aim our research focus in the next year. So citizen health, I sat in the back today, and one of the fabulous board members finally had a moment to go ahead and sign up for citizen health, and it actually does take 5 minutes, and it really does work. If you have questions, if you have concerns, if you're worried about anything, if the process is a little bit confusing and you just want someone there to chat with while you're doing it, reach out. I'm really happy to do it. The team at Citizen is also super great. I know there's members of our community who messaged me and said, I totally signed up for Citizen Health. And I said, I can't see your name. And they said, no, I really did. And so I reached out to Citizen, and they said, oh, this is a really simple thing to fix. And it was literally one email, and everything was fixed, and that family was completely enrolled in our community. So you can't make a mistake that's not fixable. It's easy, it takes 5 minutes, and it could be really important for us moving forward on our research roadmap as a community. Right now, we have about 40 members of our community signed up, which is great. We'd love more. About 20 of those are in the US, so we'd really like more of our US families signed up. And then sort of towards the end are individuals who are in progress. So if you happen to be getting emails from Citizen, it means that maybe a box is missing a check, or there's a data point missing. Reach out to me if you get emails from Citizen, or reach back to me when you get emails from me, and we can get that fixed really quickly and enroll more patients. The next stop on our research roadmap, as Jeremy indicated, is our natural history study, which we've launched this week. So here is the link and information to sign up with Matrix. As mentioned, our families who have done natural history study things here at the conference, we really need the Matrix platform information filled out in the next 2 weeks or so to make sure that we're pairing the survey data with our in-person data. For our families who are attending virtually or just didn't get the chance to be involved with these in-person visits, we are actively working on making virtual visits an option with this study, so keep an eye out for emails from me in the future. It doesn't mean that you shouldn't do Matrix now, it just means that you might have to do it again tied to a virtual visit. So if you're really into filling out surveys twice, go ahead and sign up. If you want to wait until we have this virtual option online, go ahead and wait. If you have any confusion about any step in this process, email me, emily@cherylinghope.org, and I will walk you through it. Currently, we have 7 patients, 1 Canadian patient and 6 in the US who have signed up, and they're pairing their data with their natural history study visits from the conference. You can find our research roadmap on our website. You can use the QR code on the screen. If you have questions, go ahead and email me and reach out. And as Jeremy indicated, we have one more new piece to our patient-driven research, and that is this patient outcome survey. With this QR code, you might have seen Keziah around here the last couple of days. Her poster was right out across from registration. This is a really great opportunity, as Dr. Lidwood said in her keynote, for us to understand what the reality of being in our community is. And this data is really important to help us make sure that we're meeting the mark, that we are finding treatments that are treating the symptoms and the unmet needs that our community has. So go ahead, scan the QR code, check for it online, and be part of our research roadmap. And now I'm going to hand it over to Cheyenne to talk a little bit more about the foundation.
Thank you. It's so hard to follow them. So just as a reminder, our mission is to build a global community of families and scientists and providers to advance care and develop treatments for individuals affected by NALCN channel-related diseases. And we are doing this all with the vision of eliminating the complications of these diseases. We actually changed our vision early on, is not to a future free of the diseases, because our children are living with the diseases, but free of the complications of the diseases. So we just saw a map, or previously we saw a map of who's been diagnosed in the US and GeneDx's system. This is a map of our community of people who have found us. I've been so excited about the families who have found us in just the last few months, few weeks, and decided to change their schedules and drive hours to get here. We will be putting this online as well soon, and we hope that this map grows. In front of you and at dinner last night are these placemats that kind of just show the highlights of the last not even 2.5 years, like 2 years and 3 months. There's some numbers on here of big dollars earned, people we've supported, projects we've supported. But I just want to recognize that one of the reasons that we were able, or this weekend, people have been telling us, wow, you guys are so impressive, you're moving so fast. But it didn't just start some odd years ago. The channelosome was discovered in 1999, and so people in the room, you've dedicated your entire career to studying it. CLIFAD is about 10 years old, I think. The IHPRFs are about 9 to 11 years old.
UNC79 disorder is just a few years old. But with Cliff Ave and IHPRF 1 and 2, they were families before us that found each other on Facebook and started building the community. We have a WhatsApp group that probably has 50 to 75 people on it. And some of the most vocal parents aren't in this room, but they're in Europe, or they're in South America. And they were who gifted us with this community that we can engage and continue to facilitate. Arno and Stefan, I know that you all are part of Restore Leak. You had a research consortium before us. The Libellas Foundation out of Spain was an advocacy group before us. And so we just inherited all of this goodness, and that's just been such a foundation to our success. We have 4 pillars: collaboration, ambition, transparency, and inclusion. And we were very deliberate when we chose these, and there were a lot of others we could have selected. And I want to draw your attention to 2 of them: collaboration and inclusion. If you walk away with one thing this weekend, or even one word, if we did the word cloud, again, the word that I would think about and thinking about this weekend would be community. And Jeremy, Suzanne, and I have been so fortunate to be rounded out by Carrie, Diana, Jill, and Chris on our board. For the last 2 years, we have met almost every single Tuesday night. In the last 2 years, I have not met a single organization whose board meets that frequently. We will be changing that because they're volunteers. And we've also learned that to cure wicked diseases, you need wicked dollars. And in the beginning, I was like, we're a volunteer-run organization, but that's not sustainable. So we're so fortunate to have Emily. She is a force to be reckoned with. Just our productivity has skyrocketed since she joined us full-time in July. And we're starting to have funding to support researchers. So Dr. Natia and her work, and we started with a six-month fellowship, and we'll be talking about extending it to a year. And so as we're transitioning into an organization with paid staff and hopefully some paid contractors, we can start to see more of what Jeremy has envisioned for us with the Scientific Advisory Board and continue on the pace that we are on. I think very quickly from the beginning, grew from about 6 or 7 scientific advisors to now 14 scientific advisors on 4 continents. And I know there's a large patient population in South America, and so I'm hopeful that within the next 2 years, we'll add South America, our South American scientists to our board. And so another thing I think that makes us unique is when we meet other rare organizations, most of them only focus on the U.S. Because the first families we met were not in the U.S., we've always just assumed we're an international organization. In the last year, we now have Channeling Hope Europe, and so now that this conference is behind us, we're going to start being more parallel. We share the same scientific advisors, we share the same goals, and we're really hoping that we can fundraise together and really work together. And so I'm very excited, speaking of fundraising, to launch our Raising Hope campaign. We want to raise $2.8 million by 2028. There's a recent estimate that it takes $1.4 billion to bring drugs to market. In the rare disease community, because of the efficiencies that rare disease organizations have found, that is lowered into the millions. But based on back of the paper, back of the napkin math that Jeremy's done, the efficiencies that being able to pull off a natural history study and launching it for $15,000 is pretty incredible. And so we believe we need anywhere from $2 to $3 million to find meaningful treatments for NALCN related diseases. And thanks to an anonymous donor, any donations in October up to $50,000 will be matched. There's QR codes on your tables if you want to take a picture of that and share that with your family and friends. Jackson, you started, I think, I'm not finding you. You can wave your hand. I mean, she might not be in here. While at the conference, she started a Facebook fundraiser for her birthday, and shared a picture of the conference, which touched my heart. We as an organization are going to start supporting our community to fundraise more. We're going to be growing our board to fundraise more. And just to end this is I want Jill to come up and share her story and what her family's been able to do.
Hi, everyone. I'm Jill, Jill Wall, and my daughter's Rory. You've seen her running around here with her hot pink glasses and or the purple, I guess. But I do the social media. So when you see messages from Channeling Hope coming to you from the social media, it's usually me reaching out, wanting to include your family with us. And the reason I am so passionate about that is because you can do something in your communities. It feels big. When Shay shares a $2.8 million goal, it feels very big, and I know I don't have that money to share, but you can do just a little bit, and it makes a huge difference. And so I was going to share with you just some of the things that our family has done in our small community. We live in a town with about 1,000 people. We are 7 hours away from the largest big city. For all of our care needs, we travel that 7 hours to go to see specialist doctors and even therapists. So it feels very isolating at times, and through the encouragement of the other members of the board, I was able to kind of see a bigger picture and see how my little bitty group of people could help in a big way. So got Rory involved because, of course, everybody in our community knows Rory, like many of you said about your own children, and everybody loves her and is willing to come to her needs. And so a couple of the things we've done in the last couple years since we started fundraising we've done a lemonade stand. We did a lemonade stand to attend this conference so that we could not only pay for our travel and then all of Rory's needs for travel, but then also she raised so much money, she was able to pay for all the little materials you see on the tables. She donated back to the foundation to give that cost relief to our conference budget. We always enlist her friends so that it's more of a fun event. And we just do small and see where it goes. So we don't have the goal of a huge dollar amount, and I'm always completely amazed at how much we are able to raise at these small things. So the lemonade stand happened on a weekend in our community. We just set up the stand. We told people about it on social media, and it's amazing what comes out of the people that care about you and watch you in your everyday life. The other idea that I wanted to share with you that we've used is a social media auction. And this is how you can get to fundraising outside of your people that you see every day. And the way that we did that is we put up this year it was a Post Malone cutout. Last year it was Travis Kelce. So we put this figure, buy this cutout and put it in a local store, but then share it wide on social media and ask people to donate to have that item sent to them, the figure. And so it was amazing how we had people it was a silent auction that was happening throughout a day, and they just kept putting in bids to overdo each other, and then we ended up with some matching donations too. So it was a great way to do a social media. We only had to ship out one item to get to a person. It actually ended up being somebody not too far away, but yet we got a lot of interaction and a lot of donations through that. So I just wanted to share some of those ideas that have worked for us and encourage you, because every little bit helps. Some of the donations that we've provided to the foundation have allowed them to pay for things that are easy. If we can get some of these little things taken care of, like the website for the year, or the media that you see, or covering, something small like, just a subscription to something, then they can spend the money that is donated to research. So that's just something I want to encourage everybody with. So, who am I passing off to?
Sorry, I am actively writing the exit survey for the conference, and I got distracted. So now, with a great intro to engaging your community in fundraising efforts, we're going to move into our last workshop of the conference. And we're really going to be thinking about how we can engage our individual communities in order to meet the mission of our Channeling Hope community. So we are, sorry, I have so many windows open, my goodness. In my normal fashion, I'm going to annoy everyone and ask people to move around some. So if you identify your community as being scientific or research related, I'd like you to join Dr. Ludwig at this table in the front over here. If you feel that your community is, if you are really interested in how to bring awareness to the Channeling Hope community, I would like you to head over to the other side of the room to the corner table in the front over there, where Jill is. If you are really interested in fundraising, both on a large scale and a small scale, please head to the table that is opposite where I am in the back of the room here. And if you're really interested in how you can increase community engagement, so getting your fellow scientists, your fellow community members, your fellow NALCN patients motivated, come on over to the table that I am currently standing at. If you're not at a table, think about moving. These are the 4 options we got today. Yes, so you're up front where Diana is if you are science and research based. If you are interested in awareness for Channeling Help and NALCN related conditions, you're joining Jill at the front table over there. If you are interested in fundraising, you're headed over to where Suzanne is in the corner over there. And if you are interested in community engagement, you're coming on over to where I am. I'll give a moment more for us to shuffle, and then I'll give you a question to think about. They're right here. One or two. All right. If we are comfy and in our small groups, what I would like you to do is think about the Channeling Hope community that you've been involved with for the last 3 days. And I want you to think about the strengths in relation to your group. And I want you to identify maybe 1 to 3 things that you think your group is doing really, really well. So that would be our science. What are we doing really great with science? Judging by the number of people at that table, it could be, hey, we're all here at the same place at the same time. for awareness. What are we doing great for awareness? What I'm seeing right now is maybe we need to have a store so people can wear Channeling Hope gear more often and bring awareness. If we're fundraising, what are we doing super great? Are we having a ton of lemonade stands or cutouts of Post Malone? If you're over here and you want to talk community engagement, how do we get us all to move forward together? So we're going to spend, about 10 minutes chatting with one another and thinking about what we're doing really, really well. All day on you. All right. Great work. I think that some teams have already moved on to the second portion. We'll spend the next 10 minutes thinking about what we could do better, how we can take the strengths that we've identified and build on them. Give us a strategic plan for what happens in the next 2 years before our next conference that will become the list of strengths that we discussed then. All right, everyone. I hate to interrupt what I know are really great conversations, and it's just a testament to how successful we have been here all together. I am going to start with our scientist group since they jumped to question 2 so early. And I'm going to come over, and hopefully you're ready to give me your top strength and the one thing that you think we could do better before the next conference. Don't all raise your hands at once. If no one raises their hand, I'm going to pick someone. You can always rely on PK.
Okay, so over in the science corner here, we talked about, I mean, from an outsider's point of view, I think that there's a lot of strengths in the current research network and what's going on in basic science that can lead to translational science. But yeah, we talked about how there is a strong foundation of disease mechanisms already, that although this might be a small community right now, they are very mighty, they're very well connected. Through meetings like this, there is you're starting to establish this really robust patient and researchers interaction, which is really crucial because again we've said that patient priorities should help shape the research agenda. That there's within the channelopathies group, all the different ion channels out there. The research network for that is still kind of small and very intimate, and so there's a lot of opportunities to learn from other channelopathies that maybe have been studied and understand, because there's similar structure, there's similar function. Don't reinvent the wheel. Go and see what's happening with these other ion channels that have already been well established. We also talked about how there's a lot of diverse tools available. There's iPSCs, there's worms, there's mouse models. It's, not everybody has that. And then one other thing that we talked about too was just the legacy, the research legacy potential here, that you have all these researchers who have been studying this, who are sort of the founding fathers and mothers of this channel, and you're also bringing in these young investigators, postdocs or PIs that have just started their own labs. So there's just great potential to sort of keep this going on. Oh, do you want me to talk about things that we should do better? We came up with
Just pick your top, what we could do better. I love the list, and I'll take it back with me, but give us the top one.
Our top one?
Well, top one, top three.
Okay, we did say that being able to support young investigators and more young investigators to keep that legacy going, that's something that needs to be done better. We also talked about having the research network meet more regularly, virtual meetings, so that they can sort of touch base and say, what have we been doing and how does that relate back to the patient community? And then also, I think a really important point was to go beyond neuroscience, because this disease is a multi-system disease, and so the brain's important, but what are other targets that we can also think about in the rest of the body?
We're going to share. We'd love to hear all the others as well.
Oh, you do? Oh, okay.
Since you've been thinking on it, this is our chance.
Sure. Yeah, we also talked about growing the clinical network. Because again, there's such a strong foundation of the disease mechanisms. And yesterday there were some wonderful talks from clinicians already. And one thing that I said too is force them to talk to each other. But yeah, growing the clinical network, not just in the US, but internationally as well, because you are serving an international community. And yeah, finding patients from other parts of the world. We agreed, about you need more qualitative research to complement the quantitative research that's already out there. We talked about how the natural history study data can also help drive research and research priorities. Going beyond. Oh, and then there's something here too that we talked about how to raise awareness and increase the chances of finding new patients or more patients is to see, how many panels are you guys on? Right? How many of these epilepsy panels or developmental disorder panels do they include NALCN and FAM 155 and UNC 79 and UNC 80, because that's one way, right, that if somebody has ataxia, they might say, let's screen this panel. It could lead back to these diseases. On the other hand, as a foundation, you guys can also reach out to like GeneDx and Invitae and really, advocate for them to maybe just do whole genome sequencing so that you bypass these panels that don't always pick everything up. And I think that was everything.
Thank you. Since we've identified so many things that we could expand into in the next 2 years before we get together, I'm going to come over here to fundraising to see if they can help identify how we might be able to do even more. So who's going to report out?
We combined fundraising and community because I think that comes together. Yes. So to start with the strength, I think we all agree that coming together as a community and connecting and building on ideas is going to be key for our fundraising. We shared an example of how I would have an idea, I would talk to Jill, and Jill would build on it, and then Suzanne would build on it even more. And so I think we have a huge ability to come together as a whole now and really bring ideas together. We have a few thoughts going into it, so talking about, having a store open during the next conference. I think that was a huge piece of feedback that we received. And then also something else, because we did talk a lot about the limitations that we have with the merchandise, is having select time frames for the store throughout the year, and then letting families and other community members know that that's when the store is going to be open each time. And then also potentially having a champion covering all the merchandise and having that one person be our support within the community. We talked about community fundraising, so something I wanted to do was to have a golf tournament at some point. Jill then built upon that and said, Rory can't withstand the whole golf tournament, so we're going to have a lemonade stand. And that event was already something that was taking place, so she was able to go and build off the community event that was already happening. Social media posts within the community, Channeling Hope can help with any type of media that you want to include, but reaching out to your peers or your community and someone that may have a bigger following or someone that may know someone with a bigger following and being able to post on social media. Rare Disease Day, we talked about one big thing that was done is that we reached out to a local bakery that sells donuts, and Suzanne and her family worked with them, and they adjusted the price by $1, and Channeling Hope was able to get the proceeds by extending that price, and it just raises awareness in your community another way. Someone else at our table had talked about Panda, which is a website, and like for example, if you were to go to Jimmy John's, they'll give you a code to be able to purchase off Jimmy John's and be able to use this not just within your community, but with everyone that has a Jimmy John's close by. They'll be able to raise money for awareness that way. We want to be able to create documents to help and support families, so just having that at the ready and not last minute throwing something together. So that's something that we'll work on as an organization. Another great idea we talked about is, as you all heard, we meet every Tuesday. What if we have a cadence where we have the community come together and talk about ideas and build those ideas off of each other? And we thought that would be an amazing idea. We previously worked with Give Freely, and we are going to start looking into that again where we can sign up more folks. But basically, Give Freely, if I were to go on to walmart.com, there's a pop-up that says Channeling Hope would get X% of whatever I spend at Walmart. So that's something that we're going to look into being able to add to. And it was also mentioned Amazon Smiles is another option that we might be able to use. And we would have made a killing this weekend off of Suzanne's purchases if we had that today. So those are some ideas that we have for fundraising / community. And, I think as we continue to talk together, this list is just going to continue to grow.
That's exactly what I wanted. That was absolutely perfect, and segues pretty well into our other group over here in the corner that was really talking about how we can engage our community. And I'm really hoping that somebody's going to volunteer to give a readout on what we talked about. Don't all jump at once. Oh, wow. Wow, that was pretty brilliant, honestly. All right. So a great segue from the fundraising group was that we too identified a need for the foundation and our community to create toolkits for engagement, make it easier for each of our community members to sort of reach out into their own communities and engage. So whether that's this is how you plan a 5K, or this is how you go to your local donut shop and get them to charge an extra $1 to raise some money and awareness for Channeling Hope. So I have written that down both there and in my notebook to help us do that better. We did start off by indicating that we are doing a good job of engaging our community. And even though Facebook sends Jill and I the messages of, wow, your engagement has really increased because you've been posting more, it's really great to hear that also from the community, that you like that you like seeing our engagement. You might have noticed that Jill did a post recently, how old is your NALCN patient loved one? And it was literally out of control. She brought me a list and there were so many little tick marks on it. I was like, what is this? And then I started looking, and it was just so many members of our community reaching back out to us. So I think what we're taking as the foundation from that is that we need to be reaching out to y'all a little bit more. So we also talked about increasing our search optimization, which is something that Cheyenne has already set up for us and got placed on the back burner so that we could do the conference. And fear not, in 2 weeks, it will be back to the front burner and we will be headed in that direction. And then we also had the great idea of reaching out in the clinical network and highlighting that we have some really brilliant scientists and clinicians in our network that could be sharing more information about NALCN, perhaps in grand rounds, or perhaps in other mechanisms throughout the scientific and clinical realm. And so I'm really thinking about that a lot as we head into the fall conference season and maybe set ourselves up for the spring conference season and try to highlight our young investigators who might be presenting things about NALCN-related research, see if we can help them there and help build awareness, not just in the community at large, but also targeted to our clinical and scientific communities. And that hits our list over here at community. And thank you for participating in this workshop and giving us a strategic to-do list for the next couple of years. And I really hope that the next time we're all together in the same place, in the same time, those things we could do better have moved to the other side and identified as strengths. And I think now I'm gonna hand it off to Jill to close out our conference.
Well, before I start that, I do want to share with all of you that we would love for you to follow us on all of our social media channels. We are on Facebook, TikTok, LinkedIn, Twitter, and Instagram. And just go out there and find us. LinkedIn, Suzanne sends a lot of things on there, and you have to like our page, I believe, to get there. Like, we can't send our page to you. So go find us there. Facebook I can share, and Instagram I can share, but we would love to have you join our group, researchers, families, everybody, so that when we put messages out, you can help us spread them farther. So we are so glad you all came. And my goal here is to close what's been an amazing conference, and that makes me a little bittersweet. Like, it was so wonderful, and I had so much fun, but I'm also sad it's over. But as we come to a close on this conference, I do want to take a moment to reflect, not just as a speaker for you today, but as a mother. From the moment my daughter was first placed in my hands, Rory, I knew that we had a battle ahead of us. And I didn't know what that battle was. I didn't know what was coming. I have felt overwhelmed. I have been scared. I have felt very alone at times. But today, standing here among you, the researchers, the clinicians, the advocates, and fellow family members, I feel something very different. I definitely feel the hope. This conference has been more than a meeting of minds. It's been a meeting of hearts. We've shared stories, breakthroughs, tears, and laughter. We've learned from each other, we've leaned on each other, and we've lifted each other up. And in doing so, we've built something powerful, a community. To the scientists and doctors, thank you. Your tireless work, your curiosity, and your compassion are lighting the path forward. You are not just advancing research. You are giving families like mine the gift of possibility. To the families, thank you for your courage. You show up every day, not just for your children, but for each other. And you remind us that love is the most powerful force that we have. To our sponsors for this conference, thank you for believing in this mission. Your donations have made this conference possible, and more importantly, they've helped fuel the research, the resources, and the relationships that will carry us forward. Your support is not just financial, it's deeply personal to every family member here. And to the organizers of this conference, thank you for creating this space where we can come together, where our voices are heard, and where our children are seen. As we leave here today, let's carry this momentum with us. Let's continue to advocate and to educate and to connect. Let's keep pushing for answers, for treatments, and for a future where our children can thrive. Because if there's one thing I've learned, it's that hope is not just a feeling, it's a movement. And together, we are channeling hope into action. Thank you from the bottom of my heart.
Okay, Emily just ran out for 1 second because we, in organizing this, really wanted to thank folks for being here. And so we have 2 awards that we have not given yet. They're the Channeling Impact Awards, and one was voted on by the Scientific Advisory Board, and the other was voted on by our community. And these awards are super special to us because it's the work and the effort that people put in coming here to really move our work forward, support our families, and we're just incredibly grateful. So I am going to have Emily, the Channeling Impact Awards.
I know, that's why I texted it to you, so that you could do it.
Oh, great. Hold on.
I can do it. So from our Scientific Advisory Board, the presentation at this conference identified as channeling in the most impact was by Tian Du, and he has already... Can we grab another one? Yeah.
We have to write in the official one, right?
I need another thingy. And then thank you to everyone who put stickers on things, both our first day of the conference here and out with our presentation board. It was a really close race, but we are proud to announce that PK is the winner of our Channeling Impact for our Channeling Hope community. All right. Thank you, everyone.
So I guess I'm closing out for everyone. So once again, without knocking things over, once again, thank you all so much who have come from so far away, who are logging in virtually, who have come from close, for joining us here. It really means the world to all of us to see so many amazing faces and smiles and the community come together. So we hope this is just the start. And we hope to be able to continue this going forward in discussions and otherwise. When you get emails, when you get posts, when you get messages from us, we really rely on you to help us and to continue moving this forward so we can go towards treatment. So thank you all so much for all that you've done, and we hope you enjoy the rest of the afternoon and time in San Antonio.